So hi, everybody. I want to say hello. I'm Lesley Jane Seymour, in case you don't know. And Nyla, you want to say hi so everybody
Sure,
knows
hi.
who you are?
Nyla calling in from northern New Jersey.
All right, Northern New
Yeah.
Jersey. Great.
Yeah.
Awesome. So I wanted to say thank you for joining us. I'm really excited. Nyla and I met a while ago, and she's got all the research on reinvention. That's what's really cool. She did a podcast with me a while ago, and it was just fantastic because I know a lot about reinvention, but I don't have all the numbers and all the facts and figures, and she's actually studied it.
Yeah.
So what I'm asking you to do, first of all, I assume you all know how to use Zoom by now, but just in case you don't, over on the left at the bottom is your mute button. So keep yourself mute unless you're speaking. Your video is next. And then the chat box is in the middle. You hit that, and then you can see what everybody is talking about. And I was asking everybody to say hello and give us one word to describe how you're feeling about work at this time. And that'll give us a starting point for all of this. And basically, what I wanted to do is start by giving you Nyla's bio. This is a short, tiny part of her bio. Her bio is gigantic. And then we'll launch into our discussion, and she's got some slides for you and some downloads, and we really want to hear what you want to talk about because this is about your time. So Nayla Bahri is a coach, researcher, consultant, and educator helping humans do their greatest work in the world. She coaches and consults across industries and teaches at the graduate level at Columbia University. She has conducted original research on how professionals learned and recovered from the 2008 recession, and is using those insights to support all kinds of transitions for her clients in good times and in difficult times. So here we are in the most difficult times of all difficult times, especially when it comes to work and how to reinvent yourself. So maybe let's start, Nyla. Just give a little bit about your background and how you ended up in this area of study.
Sure. So thanks for having me, and thanks for bringing me back. I'm always curious about what you're up to, so I'm happy to be here.
Nice.
I come at this work because I was a very long suffering doctoral student. It took me about 13 years to finish my degree. So when you talk about like reinvention, I was trying to finish school while I had 2 kids at home, and I had a pretty big job at Columbia Business School where I was the dean of students. And I was really interested in understanding why some people met with adversity and came out of it really well, and why some people met with adversity and seem to be flattened by the experience. And the place I experiment and play is the place of work, right? Largely because I've worked in professional graduate schools for my whole career. But I became really interested to understand why was it that some people would come up against circumstances that looked like other people's circumstances, and they were able to rebound and reinvent and come back even stronger than they had been, and why some people just never were able to recover. So I had the good fortune of collecting data in 2012 and 2000 through 2014. And so I was looking at people who had been impacted by the recession of 2008 and 2009. And there were a lot of people in New York City who'd been impacted. And I did all these deep qualitative interviews with them to try to understand what was the difference between those who were coming out of layoff well and those who were not. And the great relief to me was that it had very little to do with kind of a positivity set point or an optimism set point. It had everything to do with behavior. And that became the core of my findings, that there were a certain set of behaviors that people engaged with that distinguished their outcomes. And that's become the body of work that I've continued to develop. So I continue to do research and do interviews with people who've been through all kinds of work trauma. So layoff is usually the one that presents. Sometimes it's just a really, really lousy boss, or a restructure, or, you know, we have a new role for you that feels terrible. And so it looks different, you know, for a lot of people, but the common theme is like the thing I thought I was engaging in is no longer mine. And so I'm always interested in how I can expose people to these behaviors and engage them with these behaviors so that they can turn things around for themselves. And so, as Lesley Jane said, I have been working with people in good times and great markets. I was been running workshops along with stuff for years. And then when this all hit, we are, of course, seeing people have to adjust to working from home. We're seeing layoff numbers that have already happened and that are predicted that are beyond what we could ever have imagined. And a lot of fear introduced into work, which is the reason I'm curious about your comments. And I'm seeing all kinds of things. I'm seeing some gun shy, some anxiety, but also some good stuff coming in about work.
Nayla, do you want to talk about your major findings from
Sure.
2008 so people know where you're starting from, and then we can
Sure.
talk about now? And
Yeah.
guys, if you have questions as we go along, just pop them into the chat there, and I'll call on you and you can talk about them.
Yeah, and so I'll start by, first of all, two things. One is that I put some slides up and hopefully everyone can see them. I'm seeing them, so I assume you are too. And the second thing is that there's a worksheet that Marissa sent out. It's kind of a place that we can play for the hour that we're together, but also that you guys can have for yourselves beyond this time that we have together. The core of the findings are that, once again, what distinguishes people who come out of work trauma from people who don't come out of it as well is behavioral. And I break the behaviors into two sets, this idea of inner work and outer work. So the inner work is the exercises that require us to look deeply and to do reflection and to understanding what we want from work, what we're great at, what we love beyond work. One of the big surprises I find in my research, and that's validated every time I replicate a study, is that people who have better outcomes are doing things that don't have to do with work. So once they have their heart broken by work, or they're just not in an ideal work situation, they spend a lot of time doing things that they love that are not connected to work. And that matters because it allows you to see yourself at your best. It allows you to tap into that sense of joyfulness and creativity and resourcefulness and wholeness that gives you the replenishment you need to get back into the workplace. So inner work is, and this is something I think that is really important for a setting like this. It is personal, but it doesn't have to be private. One of the things I find is that it requires you to be honest with yourself, give yourself credit for things, but it doesn't require that you do this in isolation. So one of the things I love about communities, especially communities of women, is that we're really good at seeing gifts in one another that sometimes we don't see in ourselves. And there's an exercise I have for you guys that might help us do some of that today or in the future. So a big set of the behaviors are what I call inner work. It really requires the vision to be inner, to look inside and draw from a data set that comes from your work history and your current career desires. The second set of behaviors are what I call outer work, and that has a lot to do with networking and connecting with people who can help you learn, and with running experiments. And so I have a little bit of both of these things to offer you tonight. And maybe we can start there, Lesley, unless you want to offer something else up front.
No, go right ahead. I think that's great. Just grab the hour and run with it.
All right. So everyone have the worksheet. You guys should have gotten it from Marissa, I think, a little bit ago. And
let's make sure, did you guys get the worksheet? Did you all get it? Are you shaking your heads? Yes? Yes? Good. Okay. All right.
Okay.
And send it to you if you haven't gotten it.
And I can walk you through it.
Okay, maybe walk us through it.
Yeah, so I think it's in your inbox. If you haven't had a chance to download it yet, it'll be in your inbox. But let me start by going, let me go back. How do I go back here? Oh, I got to go back. Do I know how to go back in my slides? There we go. First thing about inner work. Here's something that I see in all of my research that both inspires me and distresses me. One of the first things you have to do when you are either disassociated from your work, you fear you're going to be disassociated from your work, you're not in a place where you have the work that feels great for you, is figure out what you're great at. What I love about this is that it's an opportunity to flex our muscles and to tell the story of our awesomeness. What I worry about with this is that women tend to have a worse time doing this than men do. And this evidence comes from some of my studies. When I first started researching people who were laid off, I would ask them, what was the first thing you thought you would do professionally? 100% of the men said, oh, I would consult. The first thing I thought was that I would take my skill set and I would bring it to the world. I would just hang a shingle and show people the value that I could bring to their organizations. In fact, the first people I'm going to call are the people who just fired me. And that's what I'm going to do. And 100% of the women said, I'm going to go back to school. I'm going to have to get ready to offer my gifts to the world. They're not ripe enough for the picking yet. And this didn't make sense to me because the people who I had studied and who I work with have 15, 20, 30 years of experience. They have graduate degrees. They're ready, but they don't see themselves as ready. So a lot of the inner work that distinguishes the people who thrive post-layoff from others is that they do this work. They figure out how to tell the story of their value distinct from their title and distinct from their organization, because that's not always available to them. And so as I think about now, the people who are reaching out and who I'm talking with, the students I'm working with who are trying to get back to work or into work when they don't have a job or they've lost a job, this is the place we have to start, is talking about your value, the value that you bring to organizations. So what I've done here is, in the worksheet, is give you a couple of the prompts that I use with my clients and with my classes to start getting people to talk about the ways in which they offer value and expertise through a combination of skills, key experiences, and the natural way that they see the world, like their natural imprint, the thing that makes Lesley, Lesley, and Kathy, Kathy, and Tammy, Tammy, right? The thing that just is your unique imprint. And I offered some sentence stems. And so what I thought we might do, Lesley, is give people a minute or two to respond to this idea. First of all, why do we think women have a harder time doing this than men do? And secondly, how would you start to answer some of these key questions? And so for those of you who don't have the worksheet in front of you, I start clients out by saying, let's finish the sentence for me. I contribute to my team and to my organization through fill in the blank. My manager and other leaders call on me to do this. Sometimes I ask the question, if someone just calls you and says, hey, can I have 5 minutes of your time? I want your point of view on something. What is it that they're looking for you to answer or offer? That is an indication of your imprint, the thing that you know how to add value to. For me, people call me a wordsmith all the time. Like, language is something that comes easily for me. I'm a big reader. I've always been someone who could find the right words for the moment. And if I think back to why do people knock on my door, or my friends now text me and say, can I have 5 minutes? It's often to say, how would you say this? Whether it's about work or breaking up with a boyfriend, you know, I have that thing with words. What is that thing that you have?
Nyla, do you want to put it up on the screen? Do you want to put the PDF? Would that be helpful?
I could do that. Let me, if you can give me a minute.
I put it again in the chat box. Everybody should be able to either open it that way or get the link.
Yep.
The PDF should open,
there
hopefully, as well. It's in chat.
Do you guys see it now?
Not yet.
Let me
I don't see it.
Hang on, let me share my screen and share I got to share a different document than the slides. I'm going to share this. Okay. So this is the worksheet. This is the worksheet that I sent you guys. And this is more important than the slides, actually. So this is the first behavior that I want people to be thinking about, which is, how do you claim your value? How do you talk about your value when you don't have your title anymore? And that you might not have a title because you've been out of work for many years. You might not have a title because that job doesn't exist anymore. I've been there. I know you've been there. How do you talk about the thing that you know how to do, agnostic of your organization and your title? Another reason this matters so much is because it allows us to imagine ourselves adding value in industries and organizations that we don't come out of, right? If I know that my offer to the world is that I create learning experiences for adult learners, and I create communities where people grow as humans, that means I can do it in an organization like a formal learning and development function at a company. It means I can do it in an educational setting. It means I can do it at my local library to run an adult career group, but I know what I do distinct from the organization. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to ask you guys maybe just to take a minute and jot down if any of these prompts generate some thinking for you, or that question I asked you separately. Well, what do people knock on your door for? When we were able to knock on the door of someone down the hall, when someone pings you on Slack or texts you and says, can I get 5 minutes of your time to get your eyes on something? What are they asking you for? That starts to tell you what your value and expertise are.
Do you want people to put some of it, people who want to share, put it into the chat so that we can talk about it?
Sure, I love that idea.
So whoever feels comfortable, put that into the chat, and maybe you'll want to share, or you can just put it into the chat, and if you want to share, say me.
I'm going to put my answer in there. Yeah, Tammy's saying some people ask her to offer the big picture, right? Offer guidance and help people connect maybe their piece of work to the big picture. Yeah. Writing, expressing what they want to say, navigating politics, creativity, and problem solving. Right? And so one of the reasons this is so critical is because we want to get to a place where we have a narrative about the value that we offer. And listen, the way that I normally help people get to this place is by doing what I call excavating the work history, right? We start by saying, where have I been? If I look at the last, let's call it 10 years, I'll sometimes say in the simplest form to people, and I think we talked about this on the podcast, Lesley, if I were to draw a horizontal line on a piece of paper and ask you to plot above that line all the great work experiences you've had, right? Times where you felt a great sense of flow, you were productive, you were happy when you walked into the office, you felt like I'm in the right place, doing the right thing with my time. Great. Let's document what those things are, what characterizes those times. If you were below the line to plot every time you felt like garbage at work, right? The jobs where you were like, I am miscast, I'm in the wrong place, these are the wrong people, this guy does not get me, this team does not appreciate me, I can't do my best work here. What starts to characterize those experiences? I see Tammy nodding. So what this starts to give us is we are our own best data set, right? So nobody can know what you know about yourself and where you are likely to perform at your best and offer the most value. I start by saying, go back to that plot above the line and below the line. What are the patterns that you see? Who are you working with? What are the kind of skills that you get to draw on? What is the purpose of the work? And then start plotting it against all of these questions I'm asking you. And let's build a narrative that answers the question of what is the work that you do in the world? What is the work worth doing for you? This is one of the behaviors. People who survive after career chaos are able to figure this out and are able to talk about it. And that opens up options for us when we can start talking about the work we do, agnostic of the title we had, agnostic of the organization that we worked for. Negotiating skills, how to get the job done, simple terms, fast, no fuss. I love it. I love it. You guys are good at this. And I encourage you, I'm a big believer in the pen and paper. That's why I love worksheets, because you can write them out. These happen to be PDFs you guys can type into, and you can type at length if you want to. I love the idea of you using yourself as your primary data set. One of the things I'll say, and probably should have said from the beginning, is that if work has hurt you, like it's been taken from you, or it's just bad for whatever reason, or even if you don't have enough of it, right? Some of us have work and it doesn't feel like it lights us up. It doesn't put us up to be our best. That hurts. And in fact, there's evidence to show that it creates in us the same pain responses as being physically injured. And so we have to do things to make ourselves feel better, same way you would take an Advil. In fact, there's research that says if you feel badly at work, you can take Tylenol and feel better. It's the same pain receptors in the brain.
You're a kid. Wait a minute. All those years with those shitty bosses, I could have just taken Tylenol?
It turns out that Tylenol is more effective than Advil. But yes,
oh my God.
Yeah, it's pain reception in the brain. We call it social threat, and we feel it when we feel excluded. If someone doesn't invite you to a meeting at lunch or to a Zoom call these days, and you feel bad, you can take a Tylenol. You'll feel better.
Unbelievable. Okay, everybody, stock in Tylenol.
I know.
Okay.
Isn't
Hilarious.
that wild? But you realize what your brain's going through, right? If your brain is experiencing that pain, we have to do things that make our brains feel better. And I say that because I think when we feel underemployed or like we need to get back to work, we tend to rush and just say like, I gotta work. And that's why I'm such a believer in investing in yourself outside of work. Whatever makes you feel like yourself again. So hopefully it's not too much Tylenol, but maybe it's making sourdough bread these days, or walking with your friends, or watching 16 Candles with your teenager for the first time, which is what we've been doing. We want to heal the brain. We want to build reward in the brain system so that we can tap into all the juice in the front of the brain. All the good stuff happens in the prefrontal cortex. And while we're in pain, we are limited. All the chemicals are rerouting to deal with the pain in your body or your soul. And so it stops you from being as creative as you want to be.
So Katie's asking, what is it with bread making these days anyway?
Isn't that hilarious?
Everybody. I just made scones this morning, but I know that yeast is a big deal right now.
I just got a pound of yeast in the mail today. It came in the mail today. I don't know. I think I actually am on a mailing list for Help a Reporter Out, which is, and one of the first things today was, what's with all the baking? I don't know. I'm not a baking researcher, but it's comforting. Yeah, Tammy's saying it's comforting.
I'll tell you, I think it's birth.
Oh, how interesting. I love that.
You put something in the oven and it doesn't look like what comes out.
Oh, I love that.
And you get to share it. It's beautiful and you share it and it's sweet.
I love that.
I'm a big baker, so I always believe it. That's what it is.
It's funny. I'm a big cook. I'm not a big baker, but my kids turned out to be really interested in baking. So we're working on it at home. And now we've got flour and yeast. It came in the mail today. So we're back to it. I can't overstate that enough. You got to do stuff that makes you feel like yourself, because that's who you want to be when you go back to interview, right? You want to be not the bitter, pissed off, broken person who bad work, made cry. You want to be like the rich, gorgeous creature that you can be. So whatever brings you back to yourself. Yeah, baking sounds like a good place to start. Okay, so this is the first thing I always say to people is, let's go back and excavate, name your career value, put words around it, create the narrative, and get comfortable talking about it. Call your friends and say, here's how I'm going to talk about my career thus far. What do you think? Does it sound honest? Am I giving myself enough credit? People who do this have far different outcomes than people who don't. The next thing I want to do is ask people to think about career desires. And I use the word desire kind of deliberately. I know it tends to evoke other things for people, but it really matters to me that we get to talk to our bodies and ourselves now and say, what do I really want from work now? What would answer the question, what is work worth doing? If I'm going to spend 40, 50, 60 hours of a week, listen, we spend 90,000 hours of our lives at work. There's not a single thing we do in our conscious time that we do more of than work, right? We sleep about 120,000 hours in our lives, if we're lucky. We spend more time at work than we do with our spouses, our kids, anything. So my point of view is like, it better count, right? It better feel like something I'm meant to be doing in the world. I'm learning, I'm growing, I'm connecting, I'm offering value. So I ask people next, and the people who thrive really do ask themselves, what would great work mean now? And a period of reinvention, a period of a break, whatever that break looks like, is really the opportunity to stop and say, today, in this season of my life, what do I need? And so I offer a couple of prompts here. What are the values I want to honor in my work? What is the thing I'm doing? So think about what Lesley just said, right? Baking for her is about birth. It's about creation. If she wants more of that in her life, how can that show up in work? How can we start to imagine that thing, that sentiment, that feeling could be part of her daily life? Because I'm a huge believer, and I hope you are too, that we don't have to kind of leave our hearts at the door when we go to work. We want to be that integrated whole person. The more that we know about ourselves, the more that Lesley can say, I like to make things, right? From beginning to end, I want to grow something, which makes total sense given what we know about you, Lesley. We have to be aware that that's a need we have in our lives in order for us to materialize that in our work lives. So I'd love to hear any responses you guys might have to what you think about this, what you know you need, what values. And again, I've noticed in my own life, a value around creation was not a part of my career in my 20s and 30s, but pretty deep into my 40s, creation's a big part of what I want from work. And so I now build work that allows me to create.
Do you want people to put some answers into the
Sure,
chat? And do you want anybody to talk about how they're feeling?
I would love to. Yeah, I would love someone to come off mute and respond to what I'm saying so far, if this feels like it's an exercise that feels available to you, like this is what you want to be doing, or you've been doing some of it intuitively. Yeah,
Just
I'd love
type
to hear it.
in there in the bottom me, and then it will help you get off mute if you're having trouble. Nyla, you want to give us the prompt, the question? Is
Sure.
it what is work worth doing?
Yeah, what is work worth doing? Let's start with that question. That's probably one of my favorite questions. What is work worth doing to you right now in this season of your life?
And because so much has changed, I would imagine that a lot of people on this call, the question is, what work is worth doing?
Mm,
Things have become so, so black and white right now. It's like,
yeah.
if I'm spending an hour, why am I spending this hour doing
Yeah.
this?
And the place I love to start is your values, and I think if this moment in time doesn't make your values really, really clear, I don't know
Yeah.
what would, you know? So, for me, a value is ease. Right now life feels really hard. Like something simple, like getting flour into my house feels really hard. And I'm living a pretty blessed life if that's my biggest problem. Um, but it's made me very aware that some of the unease I feel is that I want flow in my life. I want a simple life that offers me a way to navigate through the day without too much effort. Maybe I can't have it right now, but as I build my future, I think that's what I want. I want to be in the sense of flow. That's a value for me.
So
Um,
do you see Kathy says,
Thank
I
you. I
work
work
with,
with family
go
givers.
ahead.
I love supporting valid. So she says, I work with family caregivers. I love supporting, validating, connecting, creating community. I've thrown out lots of programs or set them aside to regroup and create offers that will work for them. I love that. And that's what I love to know. Like, what is the raw material of the work that you want to be doing? And then how can we think about options? That's the beauty of doing this work, is that it gets you distilled down to the essence of the value that you're offering and the thing you want to experience the most and offer the most in the work that you do. And then that gives you the platform to generate options. Yeah, I love it.
So Coralyn's saying creative, connectedness, flexibility,
Flexibility.
up-leveling.
Yeah, I love it. What does up-leveling mean, Coralyn? I want great collaboration, and now I also want to do work that is of service somehow. I love that. Yeah, I'm still curious about up-leveling. Maybe Coralyn will drop me a note at one point about what that means to her.
Or do you want to say, Coralyn? She trying to get unmute? There you are.
Yeah, there you
Coralyn,
are.
what does up-leveling mean to you? Do you hear us? Yeah.
Yes, so up-leveling to me, it's a feeling of empowering others, up-leveling just in everything we do, up-leveling the team,
Yeah.
empowering others, and then working with a sense of excellence.
I love that. Well, I'm glad you clarified that, because sometimes I think up-leveling means up-leveling my skill set. And I love what you're saying, that it's about bringing everybody up together. I love it. Thank you so much. And here's why I think this is so critical, because when we did talk about this on the podcast, Lesley, when I am guiding people towards thinking about strategizing around new work, I usually I say to them, how much time do you have, right? So for some people, they have a full-time job, they've got kids at home, they've got 4 hours a week to think about their new job. Some people are empty nesters, they're looking for new work for the first time in a long time, and they have 20 hours a week they're willing to spend on a job hunt or creating the right professional path for themselves. So I usually say, let's start with a working equation. I want to think about your time in thirds. And that's how we're going to start.
Oh yeah, this was interesting.
And it's going to vary over by person, by response, by feedback, and by time, right? Where we are right now is going to lead most of us to thinking about the equation a little bit differently. But I generally say to people, think about your time in thirds. A third of your time on the job hunt should be spent applying for appropriate work, right? Not spamming LinkedIn with 10,000 resumes for jobs you don't want, but selectively identifying and applying for the right type of work for you, appropriate work. The second third of your time should be spent doing very intelligent networking. Again, not having coffee with everyone you've ever known in your life, but figuring out what it is you need to know, what you want to understand, what you don't know, and building a networking plan for that. We'll talk about that at the end of the session. But the third part is something I learned from studying people who had no work, which is that third part of your time should be spent doing what I call making work. Okay, so a third of your time is spent applying for appropriate work, a third of your time is spent networking, and a third of your time is spent making work. This time, right now, with the world in upheaval and most of us at home, I am saying loud and clear, this is a time for making work. Everybody should be making work right now. So what I love about the rule is that it's fluid. So in times when you are earlier in career, you probably are going to spend more time in the first 2/3, right? Your library of resources is probably smaller. The idea of making work's less available to you, but you are applying for jobs and networking like mad. At a time where we are right now, that first third is probably going to be shrunk for most people. There are companies hiring. There are industries that are going to grow as a result of this, but it's not going to be as robust as it was 4 or 5 months ago. So most of us are going to spend more time in the second 2/3, networking and making work. So I'm hopeful that we can spend a little bit of time talking about making work. And I thank you, Katie, for asking the question, what do I mean by making work? So what I mean by making work, it comes from the idea of creating and directing your projects that leverage your sets of experiences, skills, and knowledge. And it looks different for different people, right? For some people, making work is something classically creative, right? It's something like drawing, writing, painting, baking. It is taking instinct you have internally and creating art, right? That's not available to me because I'm not creative, so I don't do that. For some people, it means teaching, right? So some people who I work with, and I see this a lot right now, people who have a set of expertise. It could be anything from accounting to coaching to exercise to marketing, but you are taking your skills and you're codifying it and offering it to the world through teaching. Sometimes it's paid, sometimes it's unpaid, but if you have 20 or 30 years of expertise, you're turning that into an asset that someone else can use, and you're doing it yourself, right? For some people, it's prototyping, right? So something one of my dear friends says to me all the time, if you see a business problem in the world and you say, oh my God, you're doing it wrong, that starts to signal that you have a set of expertise that needs to be prototyped into a solution that can be offered to the world. And I'll give you an example. So I come from higher education, which is undergoing a huge amount of transformation right now and probably going to look really different 4 or 5 months from now than it did a year ago. And I have a lot of friends who work in different parts of higher ed, and a lot of them are thinking about onboarding students. What is orientation? What does welcoming hundreds of students to campus look like when they can't walk into a big cafeteria or auditorium where there's thousands of people convening? So one of my colleagues, former colleagues, who has already been eliminated from her role, is building a prototype of what ideal onboarding orientation can be looking like for students who can't appear in person. She's taking her 20 years of knowledge, she's writing a model, designing a program. What she's going to do with it, we don't know yet. But rather than waiting for jobs to appear that aren't going to appear between now and September, she's making work. She's saying, okay, I know all this stuff. I've been working in this field for 20 years. I know what to do. I know what the core ideas are that a company or a school will use to onboard virtually. I'm going to make a prototype. That is, I think, one of the best ways that we can make work is like write the playbook that you wish you had in your last job, or that you would use to onboard someone who joins an organization. What would you do the first 30 days that you're on your ideal job, right? Because what we tend to do is sit in our offices, our home offices, and obsess, right? And apply to more jobs and stalk the people who seem to have more success than we do on LinkedIn. Write the playbook. What is the plan you have? When someone says to you in an interview, how are you going to spend your first 30, 60, 90 days? Be ready. Have that written down. Have it documented. That's making work, right? Take that rich library of your experiences and make work. Writing right now, there's so much content coming out, right? And there's a lot of garbage coming out. What do you have to say that adds value, that leverages your personal network, that offers your distinct voice into problem solving? What is the business pain that you see in the world that you know how to fix, right? And you know, because you read an article and you think, oh my God, I would know what to do. I've done that before. Document it, write it down. That's making work. All right, and I will say this, Lesley, you asked earlier, on my website, I have a worksheet that you can download that I call your highlight reel. And that is a way of capturing. If you don't know where to begin, like you go back into your work history and say, there are 3 or 4 major wins I've had in my life. I've transformed this company. I saved this product. I opened this office. Let's capture that. That becomes part of your making work, right? Documenting that, codifying that, that's making work.
Nyla, should that be on LinkedIn or should that be in some other
It
way?
can be in a number of ways. So I have friends right now who are teaching classes online. I have a friend who's a chemist who was laid off a month ago. She right now is building a chemistry curriculum geared towards college students. And so she has open hours on Zoom for chemistry students who are home trying to complete the semester. She does the Zoom calls. She captures what they're struggling with. She's writing a curriculum. Does she know what she's going to do with it yet? Not really, but it's part of activating your brain and creating a document, an asset to account for the time, to deepen your skills. It's great data to know, like, do I actually really love teaching chemistry again? Or do I want to go back to the lab when the labs reopen? Writing on LinkedIn or Medium is an option. That's what I'm doing. I'm podcasting right now, just trying to say, if I have a time to make work, I'm going to make some work that I can share. Some people are doing it for their personal usage. They're just doing it to say, I want to have something to show for the 30 or 60 days I spend at home, and a way of accounting for my time and a story to tell when I get back into networking. I look at this. So Kathy, also chemists are maybe home right now. Yep. I'm curious to know. I mean, listen, a lot of us, when we are underemployed, underutilized, bored at work, can create the kind of dream scenario. If only I could have that job. If only I could be invited to solve that problem. If only I could be on that team. So I'm inviting you to do the work, to spend the time to document, write, capture, make the PowerPoint deck you would have made. If you've got the expertise and it's not being leveraged, don't let it go to waste. Keeps your brain sharp, and it gives you a great story to tell when you're back out there.
What do you do with it afterwards, Nyla? I mean, I do know people who've used time like that to change careers, where there was this one crazy person I knew who moved from, I can't remember what she was doing, into tech, and she's set herself a goal of she was going to follow the top 100 people in tech. She was going to make sure blah, 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 blah. And she did. She actually changed in 6 months by following people and getting and responding to them and blah, 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 all this stuff. Are you talking about doing that visibly, or just do you keep it for yourself, and what do you do with it?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and I don't think there's a single answer. So I have a friend who is also in higher education. She works in executive education, and she, after all these years, had a point of view that there are 10 things that every executive learning team has to have in order for them to maximize being sent off site to an executive ed program. And she created a rule book that she ended up selling to other companies as a product. I have a friend who was laid off, who had been with one of the big 3 consulting firms and had then started consulting on his own, and realized what he really missed was the professional development that comes with being at a Bain or a BCG or a McKinsey. So he started making his wish list of courses that he wished he could learn as an independent consultant, and started soliciting people who offered that kind of training, and built relationships. It took him almost 2 years to start calling people and said, there's hundreds and hundreds of people like me who are from top schools, top companies, who are on their own, and we don't get that kind of development, but we need it. So if you could spend a day with a group of top consultants like me, what would you teach us? And he ended up building a huge umbrella organization that now you pay a membership to as an independent consultant, and it serves as your kind of ongoing MBA. So he used it as a form of connecting to other people, but building a personal point of view, like his course of study. What would this turn into for me or people like me? I know a lot of people publishing right now, LinkedIn, other places. I also know a lot of people who are doing it just to say, I'm not working right now. I have small kids at home, or I have elder care issues, and it's not the right time for me to get a job. But when the time is right for me to go back in there, I want to have codified my own intellectual properties for my own knowledge. But I have it. It shows that I'm paying attention, that I'm continuing to develop myself, and I'm putting my mind to use. So it can be private. I don't think it has to be public.
Kathy, do you want to, Kathy has, she's saying, do you want to talk about what your question is here? Because I'm asking, does anybody have questions for you, Nyla?
Yeah, sure. Kathy, I'm going to read her question, and then maybe if she wants to come off of. She says, if you're a potentially last career, what would you suggest the most specific focus be? For me, it feels like the 1/3 or more that is creating work. I've been out of an organization for several years. My past career was doing therapy, so it was more individual practice inside a large medical practice. Kathy, do you want to say something else about your question?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm at the point in life, I'm 65, so, but I still have lots of juice, and I really have wanted to pour way more into my work with family caregivers. And I've done a lot of teaching with them and a lot of individual work. And now that population is just exploding. And I'm wanting to bring more visibility to that. But yeah, it was like, sometimes I see a lot of this and it's like, okay, so I'm not going back into an organization. I don't see that happening. So just any advice you'd have about like, here, pour your, because it is, when I look at things, that it's like, I'm not building a 10-year career. I don't think I'm probably not building a 20-year career. I've done those things. And I've got lots of little pieces to pull together that fit. And I'm working with somebody on making that happen. But if you had just like a nugget, a gem, I'd be happy to hear it.
So I love this so much. And Lesley, I'm going to be curious about your point of view too. Here's what first of all, I think making work sounds like the right place for you guys to for you to spend your time. And listen, I also think globally right now, this first third is just it's not really relevant right now. Applying for jobs, unless you want to, there are companies hiring, it's a lot of supply chain and a lot of healthcare. If those are your fields, great. If not, for the rest of us, I got to wait till things kind of, come back to life. What I'd like to think about in terms of making work is, what is the research question you want to understand, right? So I think like a researcher. So what is the thing I don't know that I want to understand? What is the working hypothesis I have? So it might be, is Zoom the appropriate platform for me to gather healthcare workers once a month to share ideas, gather support, and deepen their knowledge base? Another, so something along those lines. Or what does a healthcare worker need in order to deepen his or her mental stamina for this period of time? So I like to start with, what is the thing we want to understand, and build an experiment around it. So when I was studying the people who were laid off, the people who bounced back were really comfortable failing. They were really comfortable saying, I'm going to try this thing. I'm going to see if I can put a list together of 100 independent consultants I know, and 6 people who can teach us enough tax information to get us to be not in, non-compliant with the IRS, and see if that's a good use of everybody's time. Do I get good feedback? Do people pay me money to attend? Do the tax professionals say, yes, I would come back for you another time? I think having a good question and being unattached to the outcome is the best way I would guide somebody towards thinking about the right way to make work.
Oh, thanks very much. I love the concept of taking it as an experiment, because for me anyway, it takes it out of that thing like, it has to be perfect. I've got to get it right. I can't fail. And it's like, just experiment, just play with it. Try something, see if it works. If it doesn't, tweak it.
You'll learn something, even if it's not perfect, you'll learn something.
Thank you.
Of course, I talked about your inner work as you're your primary source of data. There's a point at which you get out of yourself and you start saying, I'm going to collect. That's what outer work's about, as I'm collecting more data. I'm going to talk to people with a good research question in mind, or I'm going to create something with a good research question in mind and just get good information. I'm not going to be attached to the outcome. I'm not going to cry all night if it doesn't work out. I learned something. I learned, it only has meaning if we give it meaning. It's just information otherwise. So I'd love to hear, I'm sure people here have been running experiments your whole professional lives, right? Every time you tried teaching something, every time you took a job with a startup, every time you made a move to New Orleans, you ran an experiment.
Well, I'll just say, while I'm waiting for somebody to type in there to speak, having you guys, we've got 23 people right here tonight, and I didn't know if this was going to work. And I had a lot of people pull me aside and go, you had a really big career. You were really successful. You sure you want to put yourself out there like that? You could fail. And I'm like, yeah, I could. And let me tell you, this has had many spins and many pivots. And we had a pivot when the stock market crashed and everybody didn't want just written content. Luckily, we already had this going. And I was just saying to Nyla before you guys all got on, I got off, I'm doing 3 of these a week, and I got off on Monday night. I was like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing, but boy, is this rewarding. Just having all of you guys show up. I just want to tell you, just like what Nyla's saying, I am making work. I have no freaking idea where this is going to lead, but it is so wonderful to be able to put Nyla in front of people who really need her and to stand there and watch. It's so joyful for me. I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm doing something.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
anyway,
I
you're
love
part
it.
of my experiment. So thank you all.
Yeah. And I think this is something women do really well. Like think about, motherhood and just being a nurturer by nature. Like we're always trying things to see if it's going to work. And I think one of the things that having tough work situations teaches you to do is to leave your ego out of it and to be like, you know what, what's worse than not being able to put my gifts into the world? Really nothing. So
Nyla, Meow is asking, can you please share the name of the umbrella resource for independent consultants to learn?
Sure.
You want to?
Yeah. It's called Umbrex, Umbrex. In fact, the guy who runs it has a podcast called Unleashed, which I've been on recently. His name is Will Bachman. So it really draws in independent consultants who have kind of come out of the top, let's say 5 or 9 firms, and who've hung their own shingle. And he offers them an amazing array of professional development. And yeah, it's beautiful. But that's an example of something that came out of nothing. He was making work. He felt a business pain. He would look around and say, there's something out there that's not quite right. And I have enough knowledge to at least try to get started. And same thing, Lesley, like lots of fits and starts and pivots and redirections. And yeah, check it out. Lizzie, I'm always afraid I lose power through it anyway if I fail. Yeah. I think, sometimes I'll say to people like, what if you were a scientist? You just had a lab coat, a white lab coat on, and you were just really, really curious. Like you weren't a perfectionist. You weren't the most knowledgeable person in the room. It's hard for me. Like I've been in school my whole life, right? Like my whole career has been about like getting it right, knowing what to do. And I'm like, what if I just get to be really interested in what I could figure out from this? And maybe nobody will show up to my class. Maybe no one will buy my services. Maybe no one will read that article. But let's find out. And I literally envision myself like a scientist. I put on a lab coat and I'm not that kind of doctor, of course. I don't wear a lab coat, but I put myself in my little metaphorical lab coat. I said, let's just get really, really interested and see what I could figure out.
Can you talk about networking now?
Sure. And I think when I talk about external data, like getting out of your own head into the world and gathering new forms of data, this is one of the things I've learned from people who've had career trauma is that they are willing to network with people who are not. So I have a slide I sometimes use, and I'll send you guys the slides if you want them. And I just show the rings of a tree, right? And we are accustomed to thinking about our network as the people in the most intimate circle of that first ring, the people who are always on our side. And we need those people, right? Sometimes you call them your personal board of advisors or your personal board of directors. You need those people. I'm going to challenge you to think about the next couple of rings out there. So those might not be the people who can tell you how great you are. You do need to have those people and learn from those people. But they're the people who can teach you about something that you really don't know anything about. An industry, a role, a region of the world. Again, go back to this idea of a research question. What do you want to understand? What don't you know that you think would be useful when you go back to that list of what am I great at and what are my current desires? Often I find that women in particular there's like an itch you've always wanted to scratch. I've always wanted to know what it would be like to live abroad. I've always wanted to know what it would be like to work with a product instead of a service. How can you find out what it's really like? I have clients right now who are like, I really want to know who's able to work part-time in a very meaningful way where it doesn't feel like a throwaway. And the next question I ask is, who do we know who we can learn from? Who do we know who's doing it? Who do we know who up and moved to New Orleans? Who do we know who started their own media venture? Who do we know who launched their own practice? Who do we know who scaled back from having a high-powered C-level job to being a director who's really satisfied? So I think that when we're home right now, trying to figure out what's next, this is something we should be spending our time thinking about. Who are the people you admire? Who are the people who've made choices that you respect? And what do you want to learn from them? What is the personal research question you have? Yeah, so that's something I might invite you guys to comment on in the chat box, or to just think about for a minute, like, who is that person who's like, you're looking and saying, wow, there's a lot of resilience in their career. I notice that they're still on their feet after the recession, during this period of time. They're still creating something awesome. They went back to school after 20 years and picked up coding. Whatever it is, who's got a career that you admire? Who's made a choice that you respect? What is the question on your heart that you want information about? And rather than falling into the black pit that is the internet, how can you reach out to someone? This is a great time for networking. Everybody's home.
Oh, it's true.
You know, it's a great time. People are so eager for real, meaningful connection. Who's that you want to talk about? So,
Anybody want to put in some thoughts in there, like somebody who they're dying to reach out to? Or, and I always say to everybody who I know, like, if I know somebody, I'm happy to put you in touch. I mean, not everybody will do that, but I'm totally, that's my juice. I just love putting, and I think a lot of people do. And I think especially right now, I think people are really
I have not had anyone say no, right? Like I do a lot, you know, I reach out to people all the time. And sometimes it's like, you know, I write to someone on LinkedIn and say, I love this article you've posted, or I love what you're doing. And I'm, especially now, it's like people are responding back. Oh, I like your work. I'm so excited that we're connected. I have childhood friends who I haven't seen in probably 25 years, but now we're spending a little too much time online, and we're reconnecting. And, you know, I'm having a conversation tomorrow with a girl I probably haven't seen since we were 10. Our parents were friends. And she has grown her practice. She's a consultant. She's grown her practice to having a full team. I don't have a team. It's just me. I'm curious about that. How'd you know it was time to hire people? So that's the kind of stuff we're going to talk about tomorrow.
Do you guys want to put in any questions about networking for Nayla? Because it's your moment. We've got
or anything, whatever is on your mind.
Whatever's on your mind. That's fine.
Yeah.
And just to let you know, at the very end, we're going to do our lovely little spinner thing, and everybody who's on the call gets their email put in there, and they can win an hour with Nayla to get private coaching with her. Yeah.
How much of my time do I spend networking on LinkedIn? Networking on LinkedIn, I'm on LinkedIn probably at least an hour and a half a day. How much am I? I mean, it's my favorite social media, to be honest. Like, I like Instagram and stuff, but like, my house doesn't look like that. My thighs don't look like that. There's a point at which I can't. I learned from LinkedIn, right? There's a lot of really interesting stuff. There are a couple companies I follow. I love to read like what's coming out of MIT Sloan and HBR, Harvard Business Review from the business side. There are a lot of things to learn. I probably like networking in terms of like writing. I try to comment on someone's article every day, like one article every day, like a meaningful comment. I thumbs up like when my friends do something awesome, but I try to write a response to someone saying like, this is inspiring. I learned something from this. I wonder if this is also true. One comment a day. I learned that from the guy who's my co-host on my podcast. Because he's in career management at the Kelley School of Business in Indiana. And he tells his students, you have to have meaningful interaction on LinkedIn. The thumbs up isn't enough. Write a comment. So once a day, I put some meaningful comment up. And I try to post once or twice a week myself. And I'd love to connect with you guys on LinkedIn if you are active on it. I think you should be. I think there's a lot of good stuff going on there right now. They have great hashtags like who's hiring right now. They're watching the trends of which companies are going to continue to grow their teams. I think it's a great way to look at companies that you admire who are handling this well, who's got leadership that you admire. There's a lot of good stuff to learn from that. It's more productive than some of the other platforms, in my view.
Any other questions for Nayla? We got like about 5 more minutes. So you have
On
her
anything.
time on anything.
Anything
You can
that has
ask
to
her
do-
about her career or
Yeah.
anything that you want to know. She's done the research or will do it. That's what I love
Yes.
about Nyla.
Yeah. Yeah. Super.
Do you know anything about what I was worried about is everybody coming out of this with some form of PTSD that we're all kind of maintaining right now.
Yeah.
And people say that we won't really know what's going to happen till
Yeah.
later on. But then
Yeah.
somebody with these positivity people were talking about PTSG, which is post-traumatic stress growth. Have you heard of that?
Yeah, yeah. Here's what I'll say. I'll say the same thing that I say when people first get laid off, which is that the tendency is to like hyper focus on getting back to work. And I think I've learned, and I find this in my data, it's just the wrong move. You have to heal. And myself, like, like I said, my life is pretty good. Like where my husband and I are used to working from home. Our kids are adjusting. They're older. They're adjusting to being home from school and working from here. And we have what we need in terms of resources. But it is important that I still allow myself to feel the range of feelings, which involve everything from, relief to dread, given the day of the week. I went out today. We haven't done a lot of takeout, but today I didn't feel like cooking lunch. But we walked into town, my husband and I, and picked up takeout. And I hadn't seen so many people in masks at once. And I was traumatized. Like I came home and I cried for about 45 minutes and I took a shower, which felt like the only thing I could do. So I think that part of it is our letting ourselves feel the feelings and doing the things that restore our sense of well-being and peace, and not judging ourselves too harshly for, again, looking on the surface and saying, Nyla, nothing's wrong. Your life is fine. But acknowledging that the changes in the world are very, very impactful. I do think that we can grow, but I think we have to have that, I'm sure you guys know something about growth mindset. If you don't, look at Carol Dweck's work, DWECK. Our capacity, many people think that we are kind of like born a certain way. We hit a certain, period in our lives and we're done changing. People like me have jobs because we study adult development theory, which means we continue to grow and change and evolve and have greater capacity throughout our adulthoods. I love her work, and it just gives us the sense that like there is the capacity for all of us to tolerate and understand more. But I hear you. I think taking care of our mental health is going to be urgent. I think companies looking at how we take care of our mental health is going to be urgent.
So you got a few last questions
Yeah,
here
I see.
that you can answer really quickly.
What do I anticipate for colleges in the fall? And then I see someone else who's also a Columbian. I think, what am I expecting? I know a lot of schools have already announced that we will be virtual for the fall. A lot of schools,
Wow.
a lot of schools in the Boston area, BU came out and said it. I think Harvard came out and said they expect their courses to be virtual in the fall. Some schools are adjusting their semesters to be the fall semester to be in 2 halves. Saying that certainly September, October would be virtual. Perhaps we'll be back on campus second half of the fall. I think one of the things I'm thinking about a lot, because I teach at the graduate level at the Mailman School of Public Health for my Columbian on here, and the B School at a teacher's college, is we're graduating thousands of students who don't know what they're graduating into. And I think a lot of people are saying to me, well, people should take a gap year. And I'm like, I don't know what they're going to do, make work, because volunteering, traveling are going to look really different. Writing a book, doing research with a faculty, those are your options to make work as a student. That's what I'm telling people. How do I think higher ed will change for the better? I'm hopeful that we'll have, Columbia in particular really has put a lot of effort into mental health in the last few years. I think we have a long way to go. I'm hopeful that'll be a place where all colleges and high schools, for that matter, are growing. I would like to make work time to develop and polish my interview examples. Any advice on that? Yeah, so we talk about the rings of the tree. Use your innermost rings to test so write your highlight reel. That's the first thing I'll say. That worksheet's on my website, which is just naylabahri.com. You can download it, and it's just a way of talking about these handful of major achievements that you've had in your life. And it can be anything, but it helps you answer the question like, how did I do it? What were the resources I deployed? Who were the people I enlisted? How did I get over barriers to success? Write that out. Write it and then test it with your friends, people who are really close to you, who will tell you if you're bullshitting, who will tell you if you're omitting something. Like your great sense of humor is one of the ways you got through the difficulties. It's like one of those things that comes really intuitively. You don't think it's a gift. Your friends will say, it's a gift, use it, talk about it, sell it. So if the question was, how do I make time for that to polish my interview examples, try the highlight reel and test it out with some friends, or call me and we'll spend some time on the phone and we'll figure it out.
Well, thank you so much. I just want to close and tell you guys to look at the CoveyClub site. Look at all the things that we're doing there. It's under the attend tab. Bookmark it so you have it. We are changing things up all the time. I'm bringing every expert who I can find who can talk to the situation we're in now. We have all kinds of crazy stuff, fun stuff. I'm throwing spaghetti against the wall to see what you guys like. We have a great thing coming up on Friday, which is how to make the most of virtual networking with a good friend of mine, Jennifer Witter. She's a brilliant PR person, and she knows all about personal branding as well. She's written a lot for us. You can use her name on the site and see all the things she's written. That's going to be Friday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Sundays, we do a wonderful guided meditation with Kelly Ravoto. Look at the site and you can see the previous ones. Positive mornings on Monday morning. The only thing we do in the morning is Monday mornings, we do a 9 a.m. coaching session with our 2 reinvention coaches, Dana and Wendy. And they give us a tool and set you up for the week. It's fantastic. And then there's some fun. I have a friend, Jill Brooke, who used to be a TV person and now has reinvented herself in the flower world. And she's going to teach us how to decorate with faux flowers and supermarket flowers, so you don't have to go out to your florist. And then that's on Monday night. And then Wednesday night, how to declutter and organize your digital life. This is from Penny Catterall, and that's what she does, because we're all drowning in email and all this crap that we can't get out of. Anyway, and then it goes forward. May 1st, we have how to work from home chic online while still wearing pajama pants. I have 2 fabulous stylists who are going to do that. So anyway, thank you all for joining us. I hope this was helpful. I want to give Nayla a virtual hug and a great round of applause. You're amazing.
Thanks,
for
you guys.
spending the time.
And honestly, connect with me on LinkedIn or whatever. I'd love to hear from you guys. And thank you so much for doing this, for creating a platform where women can talk about this and experiment and grow. It's amazing. Amazing.
Great. Awesome. Nayla, love you. Thank you very much for taking the time.
My pleasure.
All right, guys.
Thank
See you
you.
later.